Good evening. Thanks everyone for joining us. We are very excited to have with us tonight um, our very own professional sales trainer, Mr. Victor Antonio himself. We are super excited to have you here with us, Victor. Yay! Everybody, everybody got to get their finger up and do their thing for him. See, everybody done turned their pretty pictures on Victor. I'm the only one here with you with the face. I see Renee's trying to, but we have been doing our thing since convention. Everybody is super excited, and we're all excited to have you share with us tonight a little more in depth of your training tips, training secrets, the secret sauce that you have. And so what we'd like to do tonight, Victor, is start out. We kind of brainstormed and thought of some of the ways that we could use this sales training, and we're thinking that the best way is for a brand new ambassador coming in, what's something that we can give them to help them. And a very common problem that we have is, how do we approach people? Coming up with objectives. And we got together and I didn't even realize this, but Victor brought to my attention, okay, we need characters. What type of characters? Because different characters are going to give you different approaches, different objections. So, Mr. Victor, how about letting us know how some of the approaches, the different approaches that we talked about, and the different ways that we're going to go about doing that.
Okay. So I'm going to answer that question, but let me kind of bring everybody and put everybody on the same page. So me and Tony had a great discussion about, how do you do this? And Tony did have those questions about, what happens when you bring somebody who's new into the organization, into the team. How do we train them, right? That's the key, right? How do we train them? But not only how do we train them, how do we train them quickly so they hit the ground running? The second thing is, when we were going out prospecting, how do we approach people was the second big question. And typically, we're going to have some objections. And how do you deal with those objections? So as we were talking about that, one of the things I said to Tony, I said, we need to take a step back. And the step back is to really understand a process for us. So what I want to do is begin by laying a foundation. And this first session, let's consider it foundational laying, but we're going to get into some detail. But let's lay the foundation first of what we want. And so the outcome, I'm always about outcome, right? What do I want out of this session? And what I want out of this session for us is to have a basic understanding of who we're selling to, what we're selling, why we're selling it, and what's the best way to position what we're selling. So let's start out with some basics. And again, I'll start out with the basics, but I promise to accelerate quickly. So the first thing I told Tony, I said, Tony, the best way to train anybody, even ourselves, is to really come up with scenarios. By a scenario, I mean, think of us when you're approaching somebody for the first time and you want to talk about Plexus. What is the scenario? And that's what me and Tony started brainstorming. I said, well, you can meet somebody like a mom at a grocery store. You can go to a networking event and meet a professional person, right? Get the idea? Or you can be, I don't know, visiting family, and then that's the scenario. Now you're talking to somebody on the sofa, right? Just having a conversation. So those are three different scenarios. So the first thing I'd like you to do is to kind of imagine what's the most likely scenario you're going to run into. Now let me give you the three options here. And if you have some more, go ahead and add those into that. But the first option is the first scenario is you run into a mother or a dad at the grocery store. That's scenario number one. Scenario number two, as I mentioned already, is you go to a networking event or some type of business event and you meet a professional. This is probably somebody who has a day job and maybe considering, working or moonlighting with another job. In this case, selling your product. The third one could be a family member. You go to visit somebody and now you're having the conversation. And I think, Tony, please confirm that as we talked about these three, which was the most common one? Was it moms in a grocery store or the networking professionals or family?
Probably for the average ambassador, just would be the mom at the grocery store.
Okay, so mom grocery store. Would you say that professional person in a business meeting would be number two, or would you say family meeting talking to a family member would be the second scenario most likely? It doesn't matter. It's just most likely.
Yes, the least likely would be the networking events, the business.
Okay. Okay,
We
so
don't do
so the
that till
first two would be then mom in the grocery store, or again, father in the grocery store, or a family member. And third one being maybe a networking event. Got it? So
Yep.
everybody's now on board that now we have three different scenarios. So what I want to do in this session is let's try to solve one of the scenarios. Because if I show you how to solve one of the scenarios, how to think through it, you'll be able to apply that to different scenarios. But the first thing we want to do is capture that mindset. Everybody with me? Just give me a high five virtually. Yeah. Gotcha. All right, cool. I didn't see some of you, but I figured you did it anyway. Okay?
They have some pretty faces on, Victor.
There you go. So, all right, so now that we know the scenario, the second thing is let's work with the mom in the grocery store. Let's work on, well, in fact, Tony, I should give you the choice. Do you want mom in the grocery store or do you want family member? Which scenario do you want to go with, Tony?
Go with family member.
Family
Yep.
member? We're going with family member. So now, okay, so now that's the scenario I want everybody to have in their head. It's the scenario is that we're talking to a family member, we're visiting them on the weekend, whatever it may be. Okay? Everybody with that? Yes?
Yes.
Good. Now, the third thing we talked about is now that we know the scenario, now we're talking to a family member. When we're talking to a family member, one of the things we don't want to do is rush in and start presenting. Here's what I have. I have Plexus. I'm doing this. Because they're immediately going to what? Shut down, right? Immediately going to shut down. So one of the things we want to do is what questions should we ask our family members in order to get them interested, right? So let's walk through this slowly because this is, I think, is the most important piece. So what are we looking for? If I say I'm talking to somebody in my family, what types of frustrations am I looking for? What types of frustrations am I looking for? Now again, let me walk through some examples. One is not enough time with the kids at home. I'm working 9 to 5. Would you agree that's a good one? I'm working 9 to 5. If it's a mom, I'm not home a lot. That's a
Right.
frustration. You know, me and my husband work. We still can't make ends meet. We're struggling. Okay? So the first one is I hate the 9 to 5. How about somebody who doesn't like what they're doing? Just simply doesn't like their job. That's another thing. So it doesn't like their job is another one, right? They have some debt. Now, that's a tricky one because you don't want to ask people, hey, are you in debt? Nobody wants to admit that, right? But what you do want to do is you can ask gentle questions. I always ask questions about mortgage. I said, where do you live? Do you rent or do you own? How long have you lived there? Have property rates gone up or have they gone down? If I just ask a couple of key questions, I'll get an indication of whether they're, you know, taking a second mortgage out or they're nowhere near paying off their mortgage. Somebody who's basically, you know, zero debt is going to say, I paid it off already, not a big deal. So if I paid off my mortgage, I don't have any debt, most likely I probably don't want to sell anything else. But if I start getting the hint that maybe you don't have enough money, maybe you're struggling to make ends meet, you're not taking that vacation, then these are the people I want to talk to. But what I'm looking for when I'm having a conversation with people is, what are they struggling with? And this is where you have to take time to have the general conversation. Now, I'm going to structure all this for you, but I just want you to get the mindset. What are their frustrations? What would be some others, Tony? And I open it up to the rest. What would be some others? Don't like my 9 to 5. I'm not making enough money. Me and my husband work. We have some debt. What would be some other things? Let me throw out another one. My kids are about to go to college.
Of course.
Right? My kids are about to go to college, and guess what? I don't have the money.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else want to chime in?
We're all quiet, Victor.
You pretty much covered
Okay.
it.
Yeah, I mean, you covered the basics. That's the bulk of what we deal with, you know.
Okay.
Not liking their job, not liking the hours, not having to work on holidays and weekends.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Too much traveling involved. Want to spend more time at home.
Okay. So how do you find out? So now that we know the scenario, we know we're talking to Uncle Bob at this point, okay? Or Aunt Jane. Take your pick. And so once we're talking to them, one of the things I want to do during the conversation is to figure out where their sore points are. Where are they not happy? And so this is where the presentation piece is. You got to finesse it, because if you start presenting your product right away, people will shut down. Okay? Everybody with me? Yes? Cool.
Yes.
Now, before we go any further, and we talked about this, Tony, what's our approach? Now that we know who we want to talk to, we know what their frustrations are, what are we looking to position? Are we looking to position income opportunity? In other words, present Plexus as an income opportunity. Do we want to go with the weight loss program? Maybe approach people who are overweight. or do we want to go with wellness? And I think those were the three options we talked about, right? Income
Yeah.
opportunity. Do we talk, do we come in as far as an angle? We want to really go for that income opportunity. Do we want to talk about weight? Maybe we want to approach people who are, having problems with their weight, or maybe are having health issues, right? Fibromyalgia, whatever, diabetes. So which of the three now, we've got three strategies here: income opportunity, wellness, and weight. Which strategy do we want to go for?
And I think we talked about the opportunity for income, because that is overall that's what we want to attract to our teams, is
Mm-hmm.
people who are interested in making the business work.
Okay.
So we'll go with that.
Okay. So now we know that when we're talking to that person, Uncle Bob or Aunt Jane, that we really want to, the angle is not about trying to convince them to lose weight. We're not going to talk to them about how they can be healthier. We're not going to, we're going to mention these things, but we're going to focus on income opportunity. So now we know who we're going to present to, what the frustrations are, but more importantly, that we're coming in at the income opportunity level. Yes?
Yes.
So in other words, we have to show them that they can make money at this. Okay? This is where it now gets into the real meat and potatoes of it. This is where it gets cool, right? So I'm talking to my aunt, and I asked her questions. Here's where you have to ask the questions. Okay? Here's where you have to ask the key questions. If I want to know if somebody's in debt, what type of questions would I ask? If I want to ask, about their kids, what are their plans for high school or college? These are questions I have to ask. So, for example, let's walk through it slowly. I'm going to give you an acronym. An acronym is a way of asking questions, but I want you to use this as a memory tool. Okay? When I'm talking to you, I'm going to use you, Tony. I'm talking to you. You're a family member. The phrase I always use is spin. So write the word spin down. Write the word spin down, right? So the first thing I want to do is just talk to you. I want to find out what the situation is. Just talk to you. I'm just going to have some general conversation about, hey, Tony, how's it going? How are the kids? How's the job? Blah, blah, blah. And I keep going, just asking you. Now, what am I looking for? I'm looking for points of discontent. Okay? I'm looking for places that I know that maybe, so, for example, let's go with going to college. So I'm talking to you, Tony. I said, how old are your kids, Tony? You say 17, and the other one's 16. I said, have they thought about what colleges they're going to go to, in-state, out-of-state? You said, well, I think they're going to go out-of-state, Victor. I said, wow, last time I read, to go to out-of-state college, you're looking at maybe paying an average of $20,000 to $25,000, plus another $5,000 to $10,000. That's about $35,000. Is that what you're intending to do? See what I'm doing here? So now I've asked that question. So, and they're going to go, well, we really haven't figured that out yet. Da da da. We're still working on that, and if we can't afford that, maybe she'll have to stay in-state, right? Get the idea? But notice all I'm doing is asking questions. I'm not pitching any product yet, but in my mind, I've already checked off what? College tuition may be a problem, right? Mm-hmm. That's the other thing. So I'm talking to you. So tell me what you're doing, Tony. How's your job currently? Oh, how long have you been working there, Tony? And you say, well, Victor, I like my job. I said, well, on average, year over year, what's your average raise? I'm always curious because I ask people this all the time. I said, for example, the average rate in the United States is about 3%. On the upside, it's 5%, but it's almost incredible. So every year, do you typically get about 3%? And again, if you do this right, you're going to have a nice guy. They're probably going to say, no. In fact, we've had a salary freeze for the last 2 years, right? Even if they said, here's again, it's all about how you phrase things. If they said no, I now know that they're stuck at a salary rate, right? Well, let's say they said, yes, Victor, I got the 3%. I said, that's great that you got 3%. I said, but have you ever thought about the fact that, meat and eggs, in terms of inflation, are up now 25%. When you look at overall inflation, you're really looking at 25%, which means that, even if you're making 3 to 5%, guess what? You're not keeping up even with the rate of inflation. And at this point, people are going to go, damn, I never looked at it that way. Now, let me slow down here. This is important. By providing that piece of data right there, I just shifted their paradigm. If you recall that I said in the presentation that there's a phrase I like, insight. That's the word, insight. And the definition of insight was information beyond the obvious. Information beyond the obvious. See, when she told me that you had 3%, year over year, and then I told you, well, when you look at the inflation rate, you're looking at an average of 25% just in the last year. which means you're not even keeping up with inflation, what do you think the other person's going to think? Like, damn. It's like, wow, I didn't think about that. Now you got 2 tick marks, right? You got not being able to pay for the kids to go to college. Second is your current job, you can't even keep up with the rate of inflation, which means that savings makes it that much harder. Get the idea? And so these are the types of questions you can ask, and we went from situation, now I've identified 2 problems. That's the P. And the 2 problems that I know for sure they're going to have issues with is sending their kids to college, and the second is that their income isn't really growing, and they're stuck, they're flatlining, and after a while, you can even talk about you can't even put your money in the bank anymore, because even if you put your money in the bank, the most you can get today, if you're lucky, is 3%. Most CDs today are 1 to 2%, if that. So that means you can't even put your money in the bank to make money. So again, all I'm doing is planting in your head is like, man, life's getting rough. Inflation's going up, health insurance is going up, all this stuff is going up. He says, just out of curiosity, Tony, I said, have you thought about how you're going to kind of offset, all these expenses that are coming your way? What do you think you'd say to that? You see what I did? And so what I did was simply just ask questions. And all I was doing is, first of all, I assess the situation, and then I'm listening for problems. I'm listening for problems. And so I've identified 2 problems already. The first problem being is, again, we talked about the rate of inflation being 1, right? Going to college, sending the kids to college being the second one. So immediately my brain, as a salesperson, I go, Now, if you're hearing this for the first time, right now you're probably saying, Victor, I can't do that. I can't think that way. Oh, yes, you can. You just haven't done it, enough times. But when you do it enough times, it becomes so habitual. You'll be able to pick up on these things. It's almost like a radar. You start seeing the blips after a while on your screen just by having conversation. But notice that we could be 10 to 15 minutes into this conversation, and I've not talked anything about the product. I've not talked about anything about what I do. I just haven't mentioned anything. So now I know what the situation is. I've highlighted a couple of problems, but highlighting a problem is never good enough. It's never good enough. So here's what you want to do. Let's take the going to college, right? I said now, here's the I. The I is the implication. The implication of what happens if you don't do something about that. So let me walk you through it slowly. So now we figured out, for example, the kids and I, you're going to send them out of state, but you really don't. Have you put that money away? Did you, because I can ask you, Tony. I said, Tony, so knowing that you're going to pay $35,000 per year for out-of-state tuition, have you managed to put that money away already? Was there a strategy that you had? And I can ask you this as a friend or a family member because I just want to know how you're doing it. How did you manage to do that, or how do you plan on doing it? Now, at this point, Tony, you're going to say, yes, the money's in the bank already. It's solid, not a problem. Okay, then I know that that's not a pain point, right? But what most people will say is what? I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. It's one of those things we've been kicking the can down the road. And at this point, so if she can't go to out-of-state college, will she go in-state? I said, what are the implications of that? And the implication is that you'll probably have to go to school that's not maybe as big or as Ivy League or whatever it may be. Or now she has to stay home as opposed to moving out. And so I can play with these things, okay? So I can play with but all I'm doing is trying to create the situation where they're thinking about money now. They're thinking about money. If that's the angle, they're thinking about money now. How am I going to do this? And so now, let's stop here. So let's just stop. We know who we're talking to. We're talking to a family member. In the conversation, we started with the situation. Let's just talk. And we're going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about the kids. We're going to talk about the house you have. You're going to talk about your job, your career, how long you've been doing it, how much you love it. And then we're listening for problems. And the problems are, again, kids going to school, that might be an issue. And again, debt, all these things you can talk about. So let me ask you the question, so I'm not doing all the yapping here. Does any of this resonate? Start with you, Tony, and then you can moderate.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This does resonate, and it falls right into having a conversation with a family member. And that's a lot of what we never think about is not coming off with such a strong approach, it typically needs to be about the person that you're talking to, and this is a great way to get into the conversation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because what you can do, and again, if anybody wants to chime in, just chime in. But one of the things you can do is we can create that hit list of what we'll call our probing points, right? Points we're going to probe for. If it's a family member, we're going to probe for, probe number one we send in is, are you happy with your job? Probe number two is, are you making enough money? Probe number three, when we ask about the family, how are you paying for college, right? Probe number four is, if you like your job, what type of raises are you getting? Probe number five, if you were to retire within the next 5 or 10 years, could you do it? In fact, I can even ask you that question, how much money do you think you'll need for retirement? You get the idea? And so these are just probes. Now again, from a training standpoint, if we know that those are the probes going in, we can now build our dialogue around it. Let me go through this slowly because it's really important. So if I know there are 5 probes, 5 subjects I want to touch on, in my head and in your head, you can sequence these. First I'm going to talk about the family, get an idea. But my objective in talking about the family is to really find out, who's close to going to college, who's not close to going to college, right? How are you planning on sending these kids to college? That could be my first conversation because everybody loves to talk about their kids, right? So why not talk about their kids? Then the second one could be about, well, Tony, I said that's great with the kids. Well, how about you, Tony? How's your job going? See, now I know that the second probe I'm coming in at, and now I'm going to talk about the job. Get the idea? And so what we can do is categorize these different probes. You guys with me so far?
Yes, we're with you.
Does anybody have questions?
My guys are quiet. They've all got their mutes on.
Okay. Send Tony a text or something that I'm on track here, because I just need to know if I'm on track or not.
Guys, you better speak up.
Okay. Still going?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, you guys are giving me nothing. You guys are not even helping. All right, so.
You got it, Victor. You got it. We just want to know what happens next. That's all.
Okay, so now again, when you're talking about the problems, you're going to ask now the I. Remember the situation. I've highlighted 5 problems, right? We already talked about the 5. It could be, again, sending kids to school. Don't like my job. You get the idea. Those are the problems. Now let's talk about the implication piece. The implication piece is, well, what happens if you keep doing what you're doing and nothing changes? So in other words, so what do you think you're going to do about your kids' tuitions? What do you think you're going to do? What happens if you can't put that much money away? Do you know that at this point you'll have to put so much money away in order to hit that number? If you can't do that, what are the implications? Your job. You say you don't like your job. I said, what are your plans? Maybe look for another job. Job market is really tough out there. What happens if you can't find another job, or it's not that easy to move to another job? The person is going to say, well, I don't know. I just don't know. I think these are some of the things, that you're going to get all that. And this is good because what you're doing is mentally you're pushing them back on their heels, but really making them think about what they don't want to think about. In other words, what's back here, you're moving to the front. You're making them really think about these things. So when you're looking at savings for retirement, you say you're not ready. How much money do you think you'll need? This much money, they'll say, right? And then you say, well, how much do you think you'll have to put away every month to get to that number? And then they'll say, I don't know. If you give them a number, then you can talk about, well, how do you think you'll get there? And notice what I'm doing. I'm just trying to create that tension almost like, I don't want to say I want to make them mad at me, but people are going to get short because what you're doing is you're bringing up stuff that's very uncomfortable. But that's what selling is. Sometimes people push back what they don't want to think about, and our job as salespeople is to bring it to the forefront and say, look, you really need to think about this. And so as they're asking questions, what eventually will happen is you're going to be pushing them so much, they're going to say, well, how do you do it, Victor? What about your kids? At that point, you go, before you launch into your presentation, but if you've pushed somebody to the point where they finally turn around and go, well, tell me what you're doing. Well, I'm glad you asked. And there's the ideal tee up, right? I'm glad you asked. Because I've had this happen all the time to me. I keep pushing people. They get really mad at me. I said, what are you doing, Victor? Well, tell me what you've done. I said, well, that's exactly why I'm here. I want to walk you through something I think you might find interesting. Because I know that you have these 5 issues. From what we talked about, you've told me that you need money for the kids to go to college. From what our conversation is, you don't even like your job. And again, you've already mentioned that even a 3% increase in your salary, it's not going to be enough to combat inflation. So all these are issues. Let me tell you what I'm doing, because I've figured out a way to generate additional income. Dot 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 dot. Get the idea? Okay. Now we're going to go to the dot 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 in just a bit. But again, I want to make sure we're on track. Tony, tell me I'm on track.
You're right on track. Yeah.
Okay. So, have you tried any of this in the past? I'm sure some of this you've had to try already. Tell me what's worked, what's not worked. Tell me what I've said has worked. Tell me what I've said hasn't worked.
I actually, as far as with the business approach, I am just now getting to the situation that I'm comfortable with doing it. So I've never actually tried to do it as you're explaining now. So
Okay.
what you're delivering is, it's steps for us to take to present it in a professional way, to assess the situation, to identify the problem.
And then
That's
there's the
something that I've never done.
And by the way, the last part of the spin part, and I just need to give you the end now. So a situation, here's some of the problems you're having, you highlight them. What are the implications of not taking action? And the last part is what is known as the need payoff. The need payoff is if I can show you a way, Tony, that you can generate additional income to pay off or send your kids to school, would you at least be open to the idea? Or I can say something like this. What would that mean to you, Tony, to be able to send your kid to any college they want? What do you think people would say? What would that mean to you if you could now generate enough revenue from your own business that you didn't have to have a 9-to-5, that you can work for yourself, be at home? What would that mean to you? That's the need payoff, right? That's almost the what if, right? Now, that model is not mine. That model was developed by a guy named Neil Rackham. And Neil Rackham came up with this thing called spin selling, and that's what I basically shared with you right there. And I love that model because it's very simple to understand, very simple to implement and use. Situation, figure out the problems. Within those problems, what are the implications? This is where you make them sweat a little bit. What if you don't? What if this doesn't happen? What if you don't do this? But then you kind of flip it in a need payoff. Well, what if you did do this? What would that mean to you? How would that improve your situation? If you could make additional money, how would that help your family? If you could make a little more money, do you think you'd be able to send your kids, or your kids would have more options to go to different schools, so forth and so on? Get the idea? And so that's really what we need to do, is to structure that type of approach. Now, this may seem like a lot, like I'm just raining on you right now, but really it's not. It's only coming at you like this, hard and heavy, because maybe you're hearing it in this format for the first time. But I'm telling you right now that if you implement this simple approach, situation, the problem, the implication, the need payoff, and we can define what the problems are ahead of time, we know what to say, we know what questions to ask, it becomes very easy. And after maybe 3 or 4 tries at this, guess what's going to happen? It's going to start sounding natural. And that's what we'll eventually get to. But for now, I guess I wanted to start out with the basics. And the basics is we need to know who we're selling to. I'm repeating myself for effect here, by the way, to make sure you're grabbing it. We need to know what the scenario is, who we're talking to. We now know that the angle of approach is income opportunity. We're not going to go so much after wellness or weight. We're going to go after income opportunity. So we're really looking for people who are looking to generate more revenue. So on your radar screen, that's what you're looking for. So the questions you should always be asking is it, when you're talking to somebody, is do they need to generate more income? When I'm talking to you, and you're a potential client, right? I'm in my mind, all I'm thinking is, does that person look like they need to generate more income? Let me ask some questions. Let me ask questions about their families, their kids, right? So if I'm talking again to uncle or aunt, I'm asking these questions about kids, mortgage, everything that has to do with personal finances, their house, how they live. And we got to learn how to do this gently, of course, because you don't want to say to somebody, hey, how much do you owe? Do you owe a lot of money? Do you have a lot of debt? You can't do that. Be nice, but you can't do that. That's rude, right? So what we want to do is just ask questions very nicely. Now, women are better at this than men because you guys do this all the time, right? You're more communal. You'll have more conversations about family, things that are going on with the kids, things that are going on with the home, and so forth and so on. And again, there's hints everywhere, right? I was talking to Jane yesterday. She, as we were talking, she mentioned how they really need to, I guess, repair the bathroom or redesign it. They haven't been able to do so for the last 3 or 4 months because, they just don't have the money to do it right now. I don't know about you, but that right there is a big blip that tells me, okay, these are folks who may need some income opportunity. Okay, so these are the things we have to keep in mind. So once we know what typical problems we're going to see, again, mortgage, sending kids to college, hate my job, need to make more money. Once we know that, then we start building questions in our conversations that we're going to ask during our presentation. And again, notice, I have yet to talk about the Plexus product. So to this point, this could be maybe a 10, 15, 20, maybe even 30-minute conversation before you even get to talk about Plexus. Sometimes you can get to it faster, sometimes slower. It depends on the person, how open they are, how much information they're giving you. But somewhere in there, you have to make what is known as the pivot. And the pivot is now where you begin your pitch, right? They're giving you a lot of information, and now it's your turn to really just kind of turn it around a little bit and just say, well, let me tell you what I'm doing. Here's some of the things I'm starting to do right now, and I just want to share this with you. Now, register that word. This is what I want to share with you, because you're not selling, you're sharing. And that's how I want you to view this, okay? Don't think about, I really got to sell, sell, sell. No, no, no. You just want to share what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how it's working out for you. And this is where you begin to have that conversation. So when you pivot, again, different ways of pivot, you have to find that point in the conversation where you've covered a lot of territory already about the kids, about debt, about making more money, I hate my job. And they're going to say something like this. They may ask you, well, tell me what you're doing. Or you may just have said, I feel your pain on all these because I've lived it. I've been there. I've been in the situation where I didn't have enough money to send the kids to college they wanted. Or I've been in that situation where I hated my job. I've been there. See, that's the empathy piece, right? But now what we want to do is pivot. And I said, I've been there. And the pivot would be something like this. I said, let me kind of walk you through what I'm doing today that I think you might find interesting, and it may actually solve some of your problems. I said, I discovered this company called Plexus, and I've been working with them for the last X months. And initially, when I saw this, now let me stop there, because this is where we're going to get to important stuff, but I want to make sure that up to this point, everything's cool. Tony, give me the thumbs up. We're cool? Yes?
Great.
Renee, I can see you. Give me a yes, Renee. I think Renee kind of saw me. Okay, Renee.
I think she's frozen.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Renee. Everybody else has icons. I can't see your face. Okay. I see somebody in the dark. Kathy, you're in the dark. I mean, you're in the dark, but you know what I mean, right? So, all right. So, all right. So now everybody's good up to this point. Does anybody have any questions? Kathy, hey.
Hey.
Kathy, are we on track here? Is this cool?
Very cool. I love the direction of guiding a conversation. I think we all get into a conversation and we don't know where to go, and this gives us a lot of great direction.
I think, see, that right there, Kathy, is so on point, what you just said, is that most people just want to have a conversation, but you have to go in there with a purposeful conversation, like a little roadmap. You got it. Excellent. Anybody else? Anybody else quiet? Hey, I see somebody down here. I can't see your name. The one with the glasses. There's Renee and the other person with the glasses.
That's Deborah.
I start talking. I think there you are. Deborah, what's happening?
I'm working this show and the band just started.
Okay.
Enjoying the call though.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So are we cool with this so far?
Yes.
Any questions by anybody? No? All right. I'm gonna continue then. Okay. So now we know situation, problem, the implication, and what if this could now when we've pivoted the conversation. Let me tell you about some things that I've gone through, or one of the things I've discovered. Now, let's stop right here because this is the important piece. This gets back to your email now, Tony. Now, let me just kind of draw a line here. There's pre-pivot and there's post-pivot, okay? So now that we've pivoted, now we're going to start talking, okay? But, as you know, people have objections in their heads of why they don't want to buy, right? So now, when we pivot, we have to pivot again with purpose. Just like we ask questions with purpose, and we wanted, as Kathy pointed out, we got a roadmap for the conversation. We also have to have a roadmap for how to block objections. By blocking objections, I mean we're going to find ways to block the objections before they become real objections. Let me go through this slowly because it's important. In my book, Response Block Selling, register that one, Response Block Selling. The book's on the website. It's for free. You can download it. And Response Block Selling talks about how you don't want to wait for someone to make an objection, state an objection, because if they state the objection, what will happen is they're most likely not to change their mind. So, for example, if I just kind of say, Tony, I don't like, this sounds like a pyramid scheme and I don't want anything to do with it. If they state that, now you find yourself defending that position. And that's the position you don't want to be in. Because as soon as somebody says, oh, that's too expensive, they've stated it, so it's hard to overcome that objection. So what we want to do is block the objections. Now, here's the psychology behind it. Again, it's all in the book, so I'll just give you the short cliff notes here. By raising an objection, if we raise an objection, we control the objection and the conversation. For example, before somebody says, that's too expensive, what I'll say is, many people who've looked at this product, one of the first things they'll say is, Victor, that's too expensive. Now, what did I just do when I said that? I raised the objection. But here's how I offer to resolve it. I say, past clients have told me this is too expensive, and I understand that. But if you allow me to walk through a couple of things just to show you that at the end of the day, we're really not that expensive, would you at least be open to looking at the product? And most likely the person is going to say, okay, go ahead, show me. But notice what I just did. I raised the objection. That means I control the objection. Now I'm not defending myself. In fact, I'm trying to block the objection by raising it. Does that make sense? Just give me a nod if I got your visual. Yeah? Okay? So all you're doing is trying to block the objection. So let's go at a family member, right? Now, I'm going to go through the 4 objections that Tony gave me, okay, for the objections. Family members, we had 4 objections. I've tried all that. It doesn't work for me. Okay, objection number 1. Second objection, I'll just wait and see if it works for you. Okay? Well, if everyone making the money got in when it was new, it's too late to start now, would be another objection. And the 4th objection that you listed out here, Tony, was I'm not a salesperson, right? I'm not a salesperson. These are 4 objections. Now, just like we roadmapped the questions in the conversation after the pivot, right? Now we start talking, we're going to roadmap the objections. So when I look at those 4 objections, out of curiosity, which one do you want to tackle first? Now I've said, let me tell you a little bit about what I'm doing with this company called Plexus. What's one of the first objections you want to deal with? Look at the 4 that you've just given me. I tried all that, doesn't work for me. 2, I'll just wait and see if it works. The 3rd one is, everyone making the money got in when it was new, so it's too late now. Or the last one, I'm not a salesperson. Which do you think, anybody can chime in, which objection do you want to handle first?
I'm not a salesperson.
Okay, not a salesperson? Excellent. So, okay, I'm not a salesperson is number 1. What's the second objection you want to handle?
See if it works for you first.
See if it works for you first. 2. Third objection. I've tried that, or everyone making money is too late. Which one?
I've tried that.
It doesn't work for me.
Doesn't work for me would be the 3rd one. All right, and the last one is too late. I just make, too late to make money. So here's what we're going to do is, now I'm going to make this up off the top of my head, and then you guys will massage it, right? So what I would do is I pivot. Let me tell you a little bit about Plexus, our company. because I think it presents a great income opportunity for you. Now, before I even go into the presentation, watch me raise the objection. Watch it, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes, right? Here's what I'll say. Now, before I go into this, let me just say something. When I talk to people about this product, one of the first things they tell me is that, well, is this about selling because I'm not a good salesperson? Notice how I said it, right? I said, but if I can show you that this really isn't about selling, it's really about sharing, would you just get past that and move on, so to speak? Can you just get past that for now? And they're probably going to say, okay, so it's not really about selling. No, it's really just about sharing, which is basically what I'm doing with you, okay? And can you share? And that's what I usually ask people. Are you good at sharing, right? And they'll probably say what? Yes. Now, the example I always use for people, if you really want to block the objection with an example, I always say to people, I said, you know, Stephanie, remember the last time you went to a restaurant and you really loved that restaurant? Oh, my God, the food was so good, num, 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 all that stuff, right? Finger licking good. And it was so good, the dining experience was so fantastic, Stephanie, that now you get home and you're like, man, you can't wait to tell somebody. So what do? You pick up the phone, you call your girlfriend, Kathy, right? Kathy, hey, you know, last night I went to this restaurant. Oh my God, you da 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 da. Oh my God, da 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 da. Oh my God. You know what? And you start blah 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 blah. So at this point, what are you doing, Stephanie?
Sharing the experience.
That you're sharing the experience, and that's all it is. But you're really selling. You're selling Kathy on the idea that she should go there, that she should go to that restaurant. You see what I mean? It's that same enthusiasm when you talk about Plexus. You know, you got to share it like that. So no, you got to see this. You got to see how this thing works. So when people tell me they don't sell, Stephanie, you've done that. So in other words, you know how to share. It's innate. It's in you already. We're all sharers. We know something cool, and so that's all you have to do is be a good sharer. So now I get you to agree to that. I just blocked the first objection. Get the idea? Bam, first objection. Now again, the second objection was. We went for what? I'll just wait and see how it works.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So then I said, so it's not about sharing. So then I talk a little bit about what I'm doing. Here's kind of how it works, right? And then I'll say, again, explain a little bit, give them a little bit, give them a little bit, and you can talk about several things. Talk about how you make money today. And give examples, some case studies, some testimonials, right? Some of people who've done it. Here's an example of Bob. Bob started about 2 months ago, and here's how he started out. He started selling out so many products, and without getting too much detail, he started selling some basic products, and I'll explain those products later. But here's what he started looking at. Here's what he started doing. He dedicated 2 hours every night, and basically, he started making a little bit of money. And that first check is always the best check because it's like, wow, this really does work. And now watch me block the second objection. As I'm telling about that, now I could say something like this. Now, you're probably thinking, you know, this is one of those things where I'm just going to sit back and wait and see. But let me ask you a question, Lori. I said, how many times have you told yourself you're just going to sit back and wait for it to work and never get around to doing it? Because at the end of the day, the only way you're going to be able to make any revenue is by doing it. So waiting around is never really an option. So does it work? You don't have to wait to see if it works. Let me walk you through a list of people who've made it work. And at that point, I block that objection. Are you with me?
Yep.
And again,
Yes.
You can play with the words, okay? So you don't have to use my phrasing. In the book, Response Block Selling, I have the structure that you will use, and then all you got to do is fill in your language. And again, right now, it's coming at you like this, right? It's like drinking from a fire hose right now. But trust me, this is not that hard to do. The third objection was, I've tried that, doesn't work for me. I think that's a big one. You know what I mean? I think that's a huge one. So once I've shown people how it's worked for Tony, how it's worked for, I don't know, for Lori, how it's worked for da-da-da, I said, now watch me block the third objection. I'll say something like this. Now, one of the things I always get is that, you know, Victor, I've tried this in the past with another company, and it just didn't work for me. Again, what did I do? I raised the objection. And because I raised it, I controlled the conversation. And I understand that, and I understand your frustration. Let me explain why this is different. I said, one, da-da-da-da-da. Second, you're working with a team that supports you. Da-da-da. Over the last 2 years, Plexus has gone from this many people to this many people, so forth and so on. Da-da-da. And said, what we're going to do is I'm going to bring you in my group. I'm going to walk you through this. We already have a little process set up where you're going to be able to hit the ground running, and we're going to walk you through this. Because maybe in the past, the reason it didn't work for you was because you didn't have great leadership like Tony, right? You didn't have people there supporting you, so forth and so on. We're going to walk you through because we actually have it planned laid out. Okay? Again, I'm making the words up here, but you get the idea, right?
Yep.
Then the fourth objection that we got to block is everyone's making money, but I got in. It was new. Now it's too late. And again, as I'm talking about bringing you in, you can bring that up. I said, now, one of the other concerns you might have is that, is it too late? You just told me that the company grew from da-da-da-da. You're asking me, is it too late? And I'm here to tell you that it's never too late, because here's how the financial structure works. This is why it's done differently with this company, and this is how you're going to get paid, and this is how we'll make it work. Now, let me give you a couple examples of people who just joined a month ago or 2 months ago or 3 months ago, whatever you want to use as time frame. Okay? Now, if I've done that correctly, then little by little, as I keep knocking down their objections, blocking their objections, what do you think happens to their resistance? It starts to decline. Because put yourself in the same position. You're sitting there, you're listening to me for the first time, and I'm talking to you about getting into this opportunity, right? And every time I raise an objection that you had in your head, I'm like, wow, I'm glad Victor brought it up because I didn't really want to say anything. Oh, that's what, and every time I block an objection and I raise an objection and I block it, I feel better because you brought it up. I begin to trust you because, wow, you know, he really understands me because he's bringing up all the issues I'm thinking about. Because I'm thinking about, you know, will it work for me? You know, can you really make money at this if you get in, you know, 3-4 years afterwards? So, but the fact that I'm raising the objections for them and resolving them, I'm not only building credibility and confidence, I'm also reducing their resistance. And then we go for asking the order or whatever the objective is. Is everybody with me so far? Because at this point, if I've reduced the resistance, I said, you know, based on what I've shown you, is there any reason, this is my favorite line, by the way, based on what I've told you so far, is there any reason you wouldn't want to get started? Is there any reason you wouldn't want to get started? Now, here's where we're going to do another graph. And again, we're going to get into, I'm going to highlight some notes for you, and I'll send them to Tony. She can redistribute them. But here's what's interesting. When you really sit down and think about this, you're talking to a family member, aunt or uncle, there's only so many objections that they have, right? At most, people only have 3 to 5 major objections. And if they only have 3 to 5 major objections, that means that if you can block all 3 to 5 during your conversation, after the pivot, guess what's going to happen? They don't have any more excuses for not doing it. And if you've done it the right way, again, you've reduced the resistance because you've blocked those objections. They're more likely to say yes and no. Now, in case you're wondering if this works, I'm telling you, this method works. I've used it with big groups and small groups. It works if you know how to block the objections. So, again, let's go through a recap because I want to go through the major pieces of this, and then we're going to do some questions and answers, okay? So let's go back to the first part. The first part of this grand scheme that we have is we have to figure out a scenario, and we did. The scenario is we're at somebody's house, and the persona we're talking to, the profile, is a family member. Okay? That's where we go. Now, we're also talked about how we're going to approach this. Could it be wellness? Is it about weight loss? Is it about income opportunity? We said that it's going to be about income opportunity. So now we're talking to a family member. We know up here that we're going to really come in at the income opportunity angle. Yes? Everybody with me? Because of that, we now know that typically people are going to have, during our conversations, we're going to try to figure out where those problems are. So we get back to the spin model, right? Situation, problem, implication, need, payoff. So again, now we're talking to Uncle Bob or Aunt Jane. And now the situation pieces, we're just going to talk. But we already know where some of the pain points are going to be, right? We talked about not enough money to send kids to school, maybe not, too much debt on the credit cards, can't afford this, can't afford that, whatever it may be. But we know that those are specific items we talked about. We talked mortgage. Let me just repeat them real quick. Maybe they need money to pay a mortgage. They need to move to a bigger house. Kids are in school, so that if they're going to go to college, they need more money. They may be in debt. The person may hate their 9-to-5 job. If they do like their job, they're only getting a 3% increase in raise. And so these are the type of questions we're going to mold as we're having that conversation with them. We're going to mold questions to kind of uncover where are they with those things. And what we're trying to highlight are those problems, right? And again, I said, we figured out situation, have the conversation, we figured out the problems is they're not going to have money to send their kids to school, and I'm not getting a big raise. 3% is not enough. We now know that those are two opportunities. So let's just highlight those. Send my kid to school, and I only get a 3% raise. Okay? Highlight those two for now. So now that I know this, eventually I got to pivot now. The conversation. What are they? Well, I'm sorry. Situation, problem. The implication piece is, what will that mean to you if you can't send your kids to school? What will that mean if they have to go to in-state? What would that mean in the long run if they don't have a pedigree from a such college? Whatever it may be. And if they don't like their job, 3% raise, well, what are you going to do? What's the implication if you only get a 3% raise every year? What does that mean? You know, especially when inflation is up here and you're only up here over time, that just the gap gets wider, it gets bigger. What are you going to do? And they're probably going to say, I don't know. I said, maybe we'll get a better job, maybe we'll get a raise, but what if that doesn't happen? Well, I don't know what we're going to do. I said, but what if there was a way to do that? Now we go to the need payoff. What is if there was a way to pay for your, the college tuition? What if there was a way to make additional money? Would you be open to it? And as soon as they go, yeah, I would be actually, we make the pivot. Everybody with me on the agreement on the pivot? That's the pivot right there. I said, well, let me tell you some of the things I'm doing. Because I know what you're going through. I feel your pain, all the empathy piece, right? And then we pivot to our presentation. Now, mentally, when we pivot, we know that they typically have 3 to 5 objections, right? 3 to 5 objections. And we know what those objections typically are. In this case, I've tried all that. I'll just wait and see. Everyone's making money. It's too late to get in. I'm not a salesperson, right? And we can probably come up with 1, maybe 2 more, right? If I know what those objections are, then my job is during the conversation, as I talk about Plexus, is how do you block those objections? Okay? Is everybody with me mentally so far? Just nod. If I can see your mug, okay? So here's what I'm going to suggest, Tony, because I think that last part is the most important piece, which is the blocking objection and having that conversation to reduce the resistance. So here's what I'm going to suggest. I suggest we stop here, right? I'm going to do some questions and answer, but I'm going to give you some homework, and tell me if you agree with this, Tony. I want you to download my book, Response Block Selling. Download that book, because once you read that book, by the way, it's only about 40, 50 pages of reading. The rest are examples of blocking objections, okay? So this is not heavy reading at all. In fact, based on what I told you, you can probably skim through it pretty quickly, okay? So you can knock this out in about an hour. Okay, so what I want you to do is read that book, or at least look at all the examples in there, because once you do that, when we come back for our next session, what I want to do is now structure the conversation when we pivot, okay, really give you the real sales presentation and maybe tie it in with the products so you'll know it like that. You'll see what I'm talking about, blocking objections sequentially, how to do it. It's not that hard. Again, it's just you're learning something new. Okay, for the first time. Is that cool so far, Tony? I turn it back over to you. You tell me where you want to go from here.
That is cool. I mean, I think that's great. I love the fact that you're giving us homework.
Yeah.
I love homework. I've actually started doing it myself.
Yeah. It's funny because the blocking objection piece, you'll also be able to use it for your personal lifestyle. Like if you're married, you can block your husband's objections.
I've already got that down.
Oh, yeah. So you can do that. So, guys, any questions from your side?
Nope.
I'm with Kathy. I just think this is really good direction. It's really good conversation direction, and I think it's what we all need to begin to implement with in our presentations, because we don't know where to go. We don't know where to go with conversations, and I think a lot of time we hurt ourselves with that. We trip and stumble. So
Like I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the notes of what we got. I'm going to lay some stuff out for you. You'll have it, make it easy for you. But, oh, I forgot. Part of the homework, I forgot this, part of the homework is that in there you'll see something called the response block structure. It's basically what you have to say. And once you download the book, you'll see what I'm saying. What I'd like you to do is take the 4 objections that Tony mailed out. Tony, did everybody get the 4 objections?
They did. Yeah.
Okay. So you see where for family members, there's 4 objections. You can add a 5th one if you like. In fact, I asked everybody to add their own 5th one. So look at the 4 objections under family members. There's 4 of them, and I want you to add your other objection, okay? And what I want you to do is when you review the response block selling book, when you review that book, what I want you to do is create a response block for each of these objections. Let me repeat the instructions again. You're going to add a 5th objection, whatever 5th one you want for you. Then you're going to write out a response block for each of these. And again, once you go through the book, you'll see how easy it is. In fact, in the book, there's some worksheets that you can use, okay? And once you do, I'm telling you right now, the best investment you can make in your sales career is this exercise right here. I teach this to every company, and every company just walks away going, and I always get the feedback, the damn thing works. But if you learn response block selling, the problem is that most salespeople today are taught to overcome objections. The problem with overcoming objections is that people already stated the objection, and because they've already stated the objection, they're less likely to change their mind. But if you block the objection while it's still up here, you're more likely to change their mind. So overcoming objection is old school. Blocking objection, new school, which is what we're about, right?
Yes. Actually, I was wrong, Victor. I did not send everyone an email of what I sent you, but I will. I'll go ahead and forward that email. We actually have a group on Facebook with us in it, so
Okay.
Just to kind of keep up with this here. So I'll go ahead and post it in there. I didn't because it was actually everyone's responses when I asked the question in the group.
Oh, okay. Well, that's okay. We went through them all. We went through all 4 of them, and again, I tried all that. Doesn't work. I'll just wait and see if it works for me. Everyone's making the money, got in when it was new. It's too late now. The 4th one was, I'm not a salesperson. And then now everybody needs to add their own 5th one. And once you add your 5th one for all 5, what I'd like you to do is write out your response block. By that I mean, what would you say? What would you show them? And again, when you go through the book, you'll see what I'm talking about. And again, what I'll do, Tony, is I'll send you the link. I also, if you don't want to read the book, you go, screw the book. I don't want to read a book. I don't want to read another book. What I'll do is I have a video that walks you through it. Okay, so if you don't want to read it, you can watch the video. How's that?
Okay.
Cool. All right. Anything else? I'm open for questions if you guys have any. General questions, statements, commentary, whatever.
I have a question. I was wanting to know, Plexus teaches us that we don't sell. So my question is, how do we sell to strangers?
Mm-hmm. Just in general?
Yes, because we're taught, to build relationships and that kind of thing. So that's where I struggle the most.
Okay, so we only went through one scenario today, which is the first scenario was talking to family members. That was the first scenario we went through. The scenario you're talking about is professional business people, right? Like at a networking meeting or something like that?
Right.
Okay, give me a scenario that you have in mind. What do you have in your head?
Let's say that I'm out with a group of people and we're just, having dinner or whatever, and I want to talk to them about Plexus.
Okay, and this is good. This is a great question because we're talking about scenario right now, right? The question is, from that conversation, what do you want? So again, I always like to kind of describe the scenario. So we're at dinner, we're hanging out, there's 3 or 4 people around the table. Does that sound like a fair scenario?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that creates an issue. So be aware of that. That creates an issue because you have 3 or 4 different opinions. You might have a lot of ambient noise, and then you really can't present, right? So what I would do, just a suggestion, what I would do is I would go around the table. I mean, not sequentially, like, okay, you first, you second, but I would ask questions that we talked about already. I would say things like, you know, hey, Bill, tell me about your job. Da-da-da. So Bill tells me all that. Hey, Ann, tell me about your job. Tell me how the kids are. And I'm having general conversation, right? But in the back of my mind, my radar is trying to pick up the blip. The blip is which one of these people fits the profile I'm looking for in terms of an income opportunity. So if I'm talking to somebody at the dinner table, we're just having general conversation, I'm not trying to sell them on Plexus. I'm trying to identify who's more likely to be interested in what I'm selling. Because when you, and again, I'm just giving you one scenario. When you're at a dinner scenario with 3 or 4 people, and you start, as soon as you go into your sales pitch, it just might turn everybody else off if you want to talk to one person. Now, if you just want to do a general sales pitch, I think you can do that as well. You just got to be careful how you do it. So you can. So my question to you is, what outcome do you want? If I'm talking to 3 or 4 people at dinner, am I looking to identify people who I can then follow up one-on-one with? Like, say, you know, we're talking, and I realize that you kind of fit. You know, or Kathy's there, and Kathy kind of fits. I said, Kathy, can we get together for coffee tomorrow? You know, or whatever it may be. Now, because I identified her as somebody who fits that profile I'm looking for. Because that would be my objective, to pull Kathy out of that so I can talk to her about it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you think would be your objective in your head? Do you want to try to do the Plexus pitch there, or would you rather just isolate, you know, divide and conquer type of thing? What do you think you'd like to do?
Isolate.
I think so. I think so. And I always say in sales, there's no right or wrong answer, right? It's just what you're comfortable with. And so if you're comfortable with identifying which of the 3 or 4 people at the table are more likely to be interested, that would be my approach. Now, there's nothing wrong if they ask you, you know, what do you do? You know, again, and maybe that's another conversation. If somebody asks you, what do you do? Most of you would probably launch into your sales pitch, right? Your elevator pitch, which is a huge mistake because that just turns people off. So maybe one of the topics for next conversation is, when somebody says, what do you do? What do we say? Okay? So we'll deal with that one. That one has a long answer, so I won't answer it. But I also want to reserve that one because when you learn how to block objections, that really becomes the core of your ability to share and reduce resistance. Okay? So you're going to love it. But it's a great question, though. Excellent question. Anybody else? Don't be bashful. If you don't ask me a question, I'm going to feel so unloved. It's not even funny.
I'm not
Kathy?
buying it.
I think Kathy probably has a good question for him.
Tony. I think the biggest objection that I hear from my team all the time is cost too much, no matter what group you're talking to.
Okay.
No matter what scenario or whatever. So I know that you gave us homework to come up with the 5th one. I would imagine a lot of us would choose that one.
Okay, well, good.
Do you have any general?
Say again?
Go ahead.
No, say that again. I didn't hear that last part. Sorry.
I was just going to say, do you have any general heading off that objection advice?
If somebody says, you know, that's more than I expected to pay, right? Remember, if they verbalize it, that's never a good thing. What I typically have is what I call the price block. And the price block can go in different directions depending on what we're talking about. So when somebody says it's too expensive, Kathy, give me more specifics. What are they objecting to? I know it's price, but give me a visual example, something solid I can grab onto.
I think mainly it's that they don't put the value on it for it they feel like it would take the place of a bill to be able to buy product.
So it's, for example, what's their average bill for the month? Give me an idea.
Like $200 for electricity?
No. If they were to buy your product, yeah.
$100.
$100. So we're talking about $25 a week. Is really what we're talking about, which is probably the price of going out one time, right? So here's my quick answer to your question, and then we'll talk about it when we actually handle response block. When somebody says, Victor, that's $100, that's a lot of money, I said, compared to what? That was always my strategy. Compared to what? I said, when we look at $100, I mean, what are we talking about? I said, if you have to go to the doctor today just one time because something's not right with you, guess what? You know, you're going to pay now, if you don't have a deductible, you're going to have to pay the copay, whatever, that's that much money. I said, well, so when we look at $100, I mean, that's really not even a pair of sneakers. You know what I mean? That's, you get the idea. You can almost reduce it to ridiculous. But what I like to do is when somebody says, you know, that seems expensive, I always say, compared to what? I said, because if you think about it, if I can show you how to generate, because remember, we're talking income opportunity is the angle, right, Kathy? Income opportunity is the angle. So when you say it's $100, and we're trying to get them to sign up, right? Is that the key? Get them to sign up?
Correct.
If I'm getting somebody to sign up, I mean, that's an easy one. If it's $100 to sign up, whatever it may be, I'm going to say, really? $100 is a lot of money? I said, if I can show you an income opportunity that over the next 3 or 4 months is going to generate this much money, would you agree that the $100 is almost like a no-brainer? Kind of get the idea?
Yeah.
And we can work with more specifics. I can see it in your head. You got some different scenarios in your head. And so what we can do is when we do the response blocks the next time we talk, let's talk about different pricing scenarios that we can block. Fair enough?
Okay.
Yeah. And trust me, it'll be there. And again, it's really never about the price at the end of the day. If you've reduced the resistance to blocking objections, if you've developed enough pain by asking the right questions, trust me, the $100 will go away, will melt in the background. If you've not developed enough value because you haven't asked the right questions, price will always be an objection. It will. But when we put it all together, like I said, go through the response block stuff, you'll see what I'm talking about. And then when we get together, we're going to really go into the pricing. In fact, we'll make it a point to spend maybe half the time next time just on handling the price objection. How does that sound?
Great.
Cool?
Yep.
All right. Anybody else? All right.
No more questions? Okay. I think you've done a wonderful job, Victor. They don't have any questions.
We're processing. We're processing. That was a lot.
By the way,
Yeah,
it's a lot of information, but again, just time to absorb it. I'll send you some keynotes, okay?
Okay, absolutely. Thank you so much, Victor, for doing this for us, and thank you so much, Shane, for getting on. We'll keep in touch.